do notice in regards to climate change in Denmark is that we get a lot more local heavy weather events. So we get drought periods, we get heavy rains, we get wetter winters. And that, of course, we can see in the crops. We have a lot of wet patches in fields, for example, that heavily impact yields on the other end. For this in particular, there is drainage, there is physical, in that sense, physical measures that are taken by the local farmers. We have not gone into, well, some farmers do irrigate a bit more, but it's not that big. Also due to possibilities, but we see more farmers that invest also in bigger irrigation systems already, because this is not going to change.
So in the UK, the region we're working in, not the whole UK, I guess just to the west of London, we call the Thames River Basin District. So particularly the rural areas upstream from London. Those areas are not areas that traditionally have rotations that would have ever used irrigation. The rotations we have currently are dominantly cereals, so wheat, barley, and then with a break crop, so to break that rotation, we're using to manage disease, so oilseed, sometimes called canola, but also beans and other things, so dominantly that combination. And those aren't crops, those are rain-fed crops, so those aren't crops that have traditionally been irrigated, and I don't think they would ever be irrigated. There are some smaller pieces of more targeted vegetable production which might use irrigation, but they're very small. We might call in the UK market gardens, just a field or two. We're seeing, very similar to Denmark, absolutely more extreme situations. The problem for us is we talk about this idea of wetter winters and drier summers, and that is true, and the temperatures are definitely, if we look at the data, increasing. But the thing that the farmers really see is almost the unreliability. So traditionally, we would have said, this happens in spring, but some years spring is very dry, and some years spring is very wet, and what we would call the shoulders, the autumn and the spring, the changes are really unpredictable now. So it's actually quite difficult for a farmer to plan well, or if they do plan, then things change around them and they get caught by having suddenly very wet ground, or they needed it to be dry, or it's too dry to get the crop they planned for the spring growing and so on. I think it's probably, you're a lot further south, so some things will be the same, but some will be different.
Yeah, definitely. Climate change is a big problem already in the south. And the difference we have with the UK, for example, is that we irrigate a lot already. And the systems, not all of them, but a lot of them, depends on irrigation. And so the water quantity is already a problem in the Gers region particularly, which causes a lot of trouble right now and will cause a lot of trouble also in the future, because that means that we have to think of new systems, because the ones we have right now won't adapt because of the lack of water, because of the droughts that are really even more frequent over time. So yeah, it's a big challenge, because it's complicated for farmers right now to plan just for the year that is coming, and we ask them to also just project themselves in the future with no certitudes. There's no possibility to think of a system that is working right now that will work in the future. So we are really challenged in that way. I think that's very complicated, because we have to think of new crops, but also talking about crops, we need also just the cooperatives and all the sectors to involve themselves in that research, because if there's new crops that we need to incorporate in the rotations, we also need all the market values, and we need those sectors to also involve themselves. And so in my institution, we work with them to try and think all the problems, so water, droughts, sometimes heavy rainfalls as well, but also how to promote those crops that we might think in the projects in the future on the markets.